And greetings to our fellow municipal representatives who are here with us tonight, and greetings to all of you. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Scudder Stevens. I'm the chair of the Board of Supervisors of Kennett Township, and I am joined tonight by my two colleagues, Vice Chair Richard Leff and our Secretary-Treasurer, Whitney Hoffman. The rest of the people will introduce as we flow along. It is the three of us who asked for this meeting to occur tonight. And we are here to provide information and to discuss solutions. And by the way, if you cannot hear me, I want you to wave your hand so that I am sure to speak up. I've got some electrical assistance, but I'll speak louder. Before we start our formal presentation, however, I wanted to offer two considerations. This is about Lisa Moore and what she did. As you know, she is charged but not convicted. Consequently, we refer to her tonight, her actions as being alleged. You will hear that term a lot tonight. It's not really good writing, I apologize. But we are directed by the DA and by our legal counsel that we have to do that. But I wanted to tell you that there may be events where we miss saying alleged. Please know that it is our intention to cast such events in the term alleged, so please add it in if you don't hear it. Second, it is our intention to complete the presentation without interruption other than a break midway through. There will be an opportunity for your questions to be answered following this presentation. So it comes in two parts. The first part is going to have a brief intermission, and we'll finish the first part and then go to questions and answers after that. And we will have instructions for how to do the questions so that we can answer them when we get to that point. And many of you, I see, already have the yellow sheets of paper for writing down questions. There should be enough in the back if you don't have one. And that's one of 4 ways to get questions answered tonight. Thank you for your understanding with this format and for your understanding and patience with this. We know that you are here because our former township manager, Lisa Moore, is now formally charged with stealing $3.2 million from Kennett Township over a period of more than 6 years. And you are probably asking yourself how she could have done it, what is being done to fix it, and how will this affect you? These are all perfectly reasonable questions. We've asked those same questions of ourselves for the last 8 months. And we are prepared to answer them all for you tonight. One more fact as we begin. Last Tuesday, December 10th, Lisa surrendered to the police and was formally charged with 115 felony crimes and 26 misdemeanor counts, including felony, theft, forgery, computer crimes, and related and other offenses. Because there appear to be some confusion on this, I want to let you know that I confirmed with the court earlier this week that as part of the bail requirements for Lisa, she had to surrender her passport. I know there's a lot of question and confusion in the community and on Facebook and other social media. She did, in fact, turn in her passport. This was done. I also want to assure you that the bail requirements established by the court were done in consultation with the DA and with Lisa's legal counsel. Bail terms were appropriate and legally responsibly handled. Tonight we are finally able to tell you the story of what happened as best we can in a few hours, and recognizing the investigation is still ongoing and that the trial is being structured. Thus, there are some impediments to our freedom to make a complete disclosure of all facts, but we will tell you all that we are allowed to. We continue to have some impediments imposed by the DA so as not to create a problem for the trial when it's going to occur presumably next spring. Before we begin, though, I want to add, as the township supervisors on whose watch this happened, we realize that the buck stops here. It is our job to do everything possible to fix this mess, and this meeting tonight is just one part of the rebuilding process that began 8 months ago. So let's get started. Tonight you will be hearing from all three supervisors, our new township manager, Eden Ratliff, and several of the people who have had a major role in this matter. I'd like to introduce to you now one of those people, Ricardo Zayas of Marcum LLP. He will briefly describe his background and set up the situation for us so we all have a clear understanding of events. Rick's 40 years of experience and expertise in dealing with criminal matters and embezzlement has been a huge help to the township and to the supervisors. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. As he said, my name is Rick Zayas. I am an accountant with Marcum LLP. We are an international accounting firm. I happen to be with the Philadelphia office. My career, unfortunately at this point, spans back more than 40 years. It includes time as a government special agent, approximately 13 years, and approximately then 30-odd years in the private sector. And in the private sector, I continued most of the same type of work that I did as a government special agent, which was investigating various types of impropriety. I'll just leave it at that. With me tonight, and I'd like to call her up, is Nicole Doniker. She's over here. Nicole, if you would, just step up for a quick second. She had the misfortune of working with me for the last 20 years, but that's, and on this matter, but.
Hi, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Nicole Doniker with Marcum in Philadelphia. I've been with them for 20 years. I am a CPA, I'm a certified valuation analyst, and I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist. I've done this, like I've said, for 20 years. I've done matters that involve youth sports organizations, other government entities, fire companies, ambulance squads, private entities. I've also done a lot with civil litigation, dealing with employee dishonesty, damages, and other lost profit matters. I've also worked on bank matters that have to do with potential fraud by bank officers, and performed analysis on behalf of banks into business and personal accounts of a commercial customer who is perpetrating an investment Ponzi scheme. Like I said, I've been working on this matter with Rick for the past 8 months, and send it right back over to Rick.
So the reason I introduced and asked Nicole to speak up and introduce herself is she is integral to both this investigation and the findings that we ultimately shared with the DA. So let me start with where we came into this picture. We were retained, I don't recall the exact date, but it was either late May or early June, at which time some of the events that will be discussed this evening had already occurred. Coming into this, we had no prior relationship with Kennett Township. I had, in prior matters, worked with the Chester County DA, so we'll just leave that at that. A couple of things, and then I'll get seated here. I just want to point out, Scudder mentioned that this investigation is continuing. You may ask, why is it continuing? There's a variety of reasons for that, but primarily because we, at this point in time, need to continue and follow up on potential recovery actions. During the course of the criminal investigation, it's necessary to, at times, take a back seat so that the district attorney and people charged with criminal enforcement can do their job. In an effort not to duplicate activity, or I should say not to trip over each other, if you will, during the course of that, we took a back seat. We did share our findings, and those findings are incorporated into the criminal complaint as they were deemed appropriate. A couple of things. I will answer one question that came up. How do we get here? And what are the circumstances that often surround these types of events? I don't know if each of you has the press release, but many of the questions that you would have along those lines are answered in the press release. First paragraph, defendant was a trusted and longtime employee, talking general characteristics. As manager, I'm on page 2. As manager, the defendant had oversight and access to virtually all of the township's financial operations. Smaller organizations, this becomes a relatively common event, that power gets concentrated or authority gets concentrated in certain people or one person. I'm in the same page 2. It was a multi-pronged scheme. Next paragraph, and this is alluded to or described in more detail in the complaint, it talks about simple schemes to, quote, steal. A problem that we encountered early on, like I said, this is referenced in the criminal complaint, is early on we looked at various records and we determined that the business records of the township, i.e. accounting records, things of that nature, were not always complete and or contained inaccurate entries. So as a result of that, we ended up backing away from that, and again in coordination with the DA's office, we focused our effort on what we would describe as third-party records, information coming from outside sources rather than merely focusing on the internal accounting records. Movement between accounts, this is on page 3, and various efforts to manipulate, including as outlined in both in the criminal complaint and in this document, creation of electronic records, false electronic records as alleged in the complaint. So keep that in mind. Again, these are characteristics that we encounter in virtually every investigation of this type. And again, this is all in the press release and or in the criminal complaint. With that, I'm going to sit down for a while and let somebody else go. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick and Nicole, wherever Nicole went. This terrible news that has unfolded these past 8 months has had a huge impact on all of us throughout the township, and not in ways any of us would have ever wished for. What you will learn tonight is going to be a mixture of bad news, sad news, and some good news. We have been waiting for 8 months to be able to tell you what happened. I know that you all have been waiting those 8 months patiently for us to be able to tell you. Please keep in mind that some pieces of information, such as the $3.2 million total and the exact methods used to complete the crimes, became available to us only in the past week, as the district attorney was preparing to file criminal charges. We had been waiting just like everybody else. We are going to start with the first two parts of the presentation. These two questions: what happened and what is being done to fix it? I warn you, it's going to take about an hour to 90 minutes to be able to tell you all of that. We will go as promptly, though. After that, we will take a quick break, and then the supervisors, Eden, and some members of the team working on the investigations will answer your questions. Together, we will take your questions. I anticipate, however, that we will answer many of your questions as we make our presentations. So, how did it all begin? In early April of this year, Rich Leff received a call from the fraud department of Capital One. They informed him that some sizable transfers had been sent from one of our township banks, bank accounts, to a personal account at that is Capital One's bank. They wanted to verify the transfer because they looked unusual. Rich notified our township police, who notified our bank and the Chester County District Attorney's Office. That began a whole series of communications and meetings and much more. And that's when the dominoes started to fall. As it turned out, the first group of checks, which turned out to be all unauthorized, totaled $750,000. Soon thereafter, I met with the Chester County detectives. During that meeting, the detectives, acting with my approval, conducted a thorough search of township offices and found rubber stamps that had been made bearing my signature. Those rubber stamps had been used to forge my name on all the dual signature checks we saw. $750,000, they all had my name on it. No rubber stamps had ever been authorized by me or by anybody else. And no one had been given permission to create rubber stamps. I was also warned that this group of checks might be just the tip of the iceberg, which proved to be the case. If you want more details of any of this, I suggest you read the district attorney's criminal complaint, which has a great many more details. It is available on our township website. And what Rick was referring to a couple of moments ago is the press release. The press release is in the back. The complaint itself is nearly 50 pages long. So we didn't duplicate that for everybody, but it is available on the website. And if you have trouble getting it otherwise, let me know and I'll get your copy. Following that meeting, I met with Rich and Whitney to apprise them of what I learned. It was clear to all three of us that we needed a thorough, professional, and independent investigation into what happened and to determine beyond question who was behind it. A few days later, we met with the district attorney, our counsel, and others to establish a plan. The Chester County District Attorney's Office immediately began a criminal investigation, and the supervisors agreed to fully support that investigation, which we did, and we continue to do to this day. Portions of that investigation are still continuing. This all happened during the first couple of weeks in late April and early May of this year. Rich and Whitney were instrumental in uncovering a great deal of information about what happened and for keeping the township running. I've asked Richard Leff, the vice chair of the supervisors, to discuss what was done in those first weeks. Yes, sir.
So I'd like to take you all inside the township building, those weeks in April and early May, and give you a glimpse what was happening and what your supervisors were doing. So from the time we saw the forged checks and the rubber stamps, and we met with the district attorney and the county detectives, the supervisors worked together continuously for months. We started making lists of things to do quickly and quietly. And here's what's on that list. The first thing was to support the investigation by the DA and determine what happened, including how all the financial safeguards we believed were in place were evaded. We had to figure out how to keep the township running without a manager and protect the township from further losses. We did inform township residents and the media that the investigation was going on, and we shared what we knew so far, which wasn't much, and which we had been told not to discuss or speculate about because any information we provided might later prove to be inaccurate or incomplete. At the time, we had to decide what to do about our then township manager, Lisa Moore, given the significant evidence pointing to her involvement. We also assembled a high-quality team to regain control and set things right. And perhaps biggest of all, we had to figure out how to get Kennett Township through this terrible situation to restore trust and confidence quickly so that the real work of Kennett Township could continue. So here's some of the steps we took. On May 1st, based on the evidence we already had, we placed then Township Manager Lisa Moore on paid administrative leave, and the supervisors took over all the work of running the township. Operations, finance, communications, management systems, processing, making payroll, and all the rest. We locked down every township account to prevent any further unauthorized access or withdrawals. We actually were able to stop some suspicious withdrawals and payments that were already in the works, none of which had been approved by us. We blocked every account and replaced them with new ones. New access credentials were set up for every deposit account, investment account, credit card, and on. This took weeks of work, but stopped the bleeding. But there was much more bad news still yet to come. We told the township staff what we could that day. It was difficult for several reasons. Many were friends, and Lisa trusted her, as we did. At the time, it just seemed impossible to believe. And we were also limited in what we could tell them, too. It was a sad meeting for all of us, and just the start of what was going to be a long weeks of sadness, sometimes alternating with anger, for many of us. We sent every household in the township a letter explaining what we knew as of then, which wasn't much yet. But we were committed to sharing what we could, and we set up reports on the investigation at every Township Board of Supervisors meeting to provide any new information we could. 8 months later, we're still continuing that practice. Because of the instructions to the DA not to investigate or to speculate, there was very little we could say at that time, and there was very little we actually knew. We didn't want to hinder the investigation or to ruin anyone's life or reputation by saying things that we were not yet certain of. We started digging into records and paperwork and computers to gather information for the investigation and to see exactly what shape the township was in, financially and in other ways that could be important. Unfortunately, we quickly found case after case where work we had asked Lisa to do, which we'd been told was done, was in fact never done. This included updating computer systems and financial software, having appropriate insurance coverages, improving safeguards. We found almost every day a pattern of lies and deceptions that shocked us each day. The more we investigated internally, the more problems we uncovered. It became clear that Lisa Moore had created and maintained an intentionally confusing and complicated financial process which enabled her, allegedly, to commit fraud and to embezzle funds over many years. We realized that we had been relying on a person we once believed to be honest and committed to the township, but who clearly wasn't. Yet even with all this, none of us knew just how bad it could be. None of the staff had been permitted by Lisa to open certain types of mail, such as bank statements, credit card statements, bills, IRS letters, and so on. When we began to open that mail, we found flagrant misuse of the township's credit card, unpaid withholding taxes, with accumulated penalties, which would later be paid out of township funds to avoid paying taxes on the money Lisa allegedly embezzled. I could go on, but if you want to read more details of this, it's all contained in the district attorney's criminal complaint and also in that summary press release. So we soon knew that we had to make an important decision. We thoroughly examined all the information and discussed all the information, which at that time was quite clear to us. And we unanimously agreed to terminate Lisa Moore on May 17th. Our decision was printed in all the newspapers and posted for everyone to read. We were heartbroken and outraged at the same time. Our trusted employee, colleague, and friend to many had apparently betrayed us all. So it was clear again and again that the job of investigating the crimes and fixing the damage required the best professionals we could find from outside of Kennett Township. One of the key jobs was to hire an accountant to perform a forensic audit. A forensic audit's different from the annual transactional audits that we did every year and posted on our website. Our regular audits look at selected transactions and routine activity to make sure things are being recorded properly and accurately. A forensic audit specifically looks for criminal, unauthorized, or unauthorized activity and is only done when you suspect something improper is occurring. Forensic audits also look for things that may have been intentionally hidden. As a result, forensic audits are difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. Few municipalities get forensic audits unless they suspect fraud. So we searched for an outstanding forensic accountant, and in May, we hired Rick, whom you just met a few minutes ago, and everyone else at Markham, actually. There's a whole team. He has extensive credentials in supporting criminal investigations and prosecutions, and also had worked previously with the Chester County DA. Rick and his team methodically examined all the township's books, searching for embezzlement, fraud, and theft to expose any cover-up. So in the second part of our presentation, Whitney will explain the methods used to embezzle and conceal funds, methods which Rick uncovered and documented. Overall, Rick's work helped to speed the investigation of the Chester County DA's office. Rick's findings will be used to help prosecute our former township manager. His work will aid in the recovery of Kennett Township funds, which will also be discussed later. Rick's here tonight, as you heard, along with several others from the investigations, and will be able to answer questions later this evening. So thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to Scudder.
Thank you, Rich. The investigations, which included poring over more than a decade of financial records on paper and on computer files, conducting interviews, tracking money, where it went, who received it, determining how the funds were stolen and how it was covered up, were addressed in painstaking detail and thoroughness by the district attorney, the Chester County detectives, Rick and his forensic auditing team at Markham, and with support from the supervisors. It was a huge effort, underpinned by more meetings than I care to count. Now, 8 months later, while both investigations continue to work, the district attorney has filed charges, as you know, and released a great deal of information. In this next section of what happened, I'd like to talk about 3 areas: what the investigations found, what criminal charges were filed, and then we'll explain how the crimes were allegedly committed and covered up. For brevity, we have summarized some material here. As is clear, while the focus of the investigations was on Lisa, who was employed by the township for 26 years, beginning in 1993, and who served as a township manager from 2010 until this year, everyone close to the situation was also investigated, including the supervisors. This was never a witch hunt, and the evidence bears this out. The supervisors from the beginning tried very hard to be fair to Lisa, and with good reason. Lisa was highly regarded and trusted by nearly everyone. She won local awards and even received a commendation from the Pennsylvania Governor, Tom Wolf. She sat on several boards of directors of local nonprofit and community organizations. Investigators documented that Lisa allegedly secretly circumvented conventional township safeguards by colleagues, township accountants and auditors, outside service providers, tax collectors, state auditors, township oversight committees, and by the Board of Supervisors. Let me repeat that. Investigators documented that Lisa Moore allegedly secretly circumvented all township safeguards established and reviewed. By whom? By colleagues, township accountants and auditors, outside service providers, tax collectors, state auditors, township oversight committees, and by the Board of Supervisors. Investigators also found that for years, she allegedly concealed information about her alleged manipulation of township accounts, reporting, and audits. As far as we know right now, Lisa acted alone. She began taking small amounts, which grew as she became more proficient, and as is typical of embezzlers. Her actions, including manipulating payroll, benefits, and pension contributions, and other types of fraud, tainted all of the township's operations, tainted all of the township's financial records. She is also alleged to have destroyed township records and computer files older than the 7 years required to be preserved, which prevented forensic examiners from examining previous years. That's why we're only back to 2013. On Tuesday, December 10, 2019, the Chester County District Attorney announced his findings and his decisions about prosecuting the case. As a result, Lisa Moore has been charged with more than 6-year pattern of embezzlement, fraud, and theft from the township, in which she stole $3,249,453 and change. The answer is not completely clear. When did the embezzlement begin? Large because many of the older records were destroyed or incomplete. The first documented evidence of embezzlement occurred in 2013. In the beginning, the early amounts taken were relatively small and allegedly included padding of payroll checks and the misuse of the township credit card. Over time, the thefts became larger and more blatant. Lisa's embezzlement and fraud allegedly continued undetected through 2 township administrations. In many respects, what happened here in Kennett Township fits the pattern of other municipal embezzlement cases. Let's go back for a moment and look at the situation before the alleged criminal activities were uncovered. Our former township manager was well liked and trusted by the supervisors, by her colleagues, and by people throughout the township and beyond. The people you're sitting next to for the whole region who are here tonight because they loved Lisa just like you do. She was believed to be a skilled, used to. She was believed to be a skilled township manager who got things done, won awards, and even helped procure additional funds for the township through grant applications. She was widely thought to be efficient, diligent, and responsible. She was generous to local charities and service organizations. Lisa was well paid, had another potential source of income in her household, and there was no reason to suspect that she was not actually what she appeared to be. Over her 26 years of employment by the township, she won the trust of many in our community. Many of you here tonight, like us, considered her to be both friend and colleague. To me, she was a partner. In the end, she deceived us all. She not only allegedly stole unbelievably large amounts of taxpayers' money, she betrayed the trust of everyone in Kennett Township. Up until our former township manager was placed on administrative leave earlier this year, only Lisa, in her capacity as township manager and treasurer, had access to certain township records, including bank statements, payroll records, and IRS notices. Lisa set this structure up herself long ago to appear to be a safeguard, but in fact it allegedly gave her too much control and access to township funds, and everyone else too little information. In the early weeks of May, the county detectives, along with our forensic accountant and our interim township manager, Allison Rudolph, who is an expert in municipal finance, and all 3 supervisors began our investigation. As Rich already told us, discrepancies immediately began to arise. It became clear that the budgets, revenue statements, and many of our accounts had been repeatedly manipulated. Lisa had been, allegedly, secretly moving money among multiple bank accounts to hide her unauthorized withdrawals. This will have direct impact on our budgeting and spending processes for some time to come, and we will discuss it a bit further in more detail tonight. Lisa was both skillful and deliberate. She alone knew many of the processes. She alone had access to the records, and she alone had deliberately failed to act when instructed by the supervisors to upgrade the township's financial safeguards and payroll software to make them more secure. The work Lisa had been doing to secretly manipulate the finances and payroll of the township was shocking and shameful. It was also cleverly done. The books actually looked fine from the outside and fooled even our auditors and our consultants. Her deceptions did not fool the investigators, however, and the work of figuring out what happened is still continuing. After 8 months, they're still working on it. But not only were the accounts allegedly manipulated to cover embezzlements, problem after problem after problem kept surfacing. Each was logged and addressed by Allison Rudolph, our interim manager. Poorly allocated payroll and unpaid payroll taxes, pension issues, changed payments. The list grew longer and longer each week. Some are already fixed, others are being worked on. There is nothing simple about any of this matter or in unraveling it. It took 8 months for 2 teams of experts to get to the bottom of how much was stolen, how it was done, and to find out where the money went. The investigations spanned hundreds of man-hours, dozens of interviews, and scores of warrants and subpoenas. And the work is still ongoing. In the end, the Chester County District Attorney's Office charged 1 person with the crime, Lisa Moore. From the beginning, we wanted to talk about what was going on behind the scenes, but we could not for good reason. We appreciate your understanding and patience more than you know. Had you all not been patient, it would have made the process so much more difficult for everyone involved. I'd like to ask our Secretary Treasurer, Whitney Hoffman, to explain several of the ways that Lisa allegedly used to fraudulently take money from the township.
Thanks, Scudder. Good evening, everyone. You know, I never wanted to be here and having this conversation with you, but it's really, really important. How was the money allegedly embezzled? It's a question that we've been asked over and over. We've asked ourselves, and it's one that everyone deserves to know. Lisa allegedly used several methods to steal money from the township. We mentioned earlier the rubber stamps, which is just one example of what Lisa allegedly did to circumvent normal authorization and reporting procedures. Now, before I continue, I need to be careful here. I don't want to take anybody to embezzlement school and give you all lessons on how to embezzle money from your employers. But I will try and give you an idea of what she allegedly did. If you want more details, there are lots of examples in the district attorney's complaint, which, as we told you, we've got posted on our township website. As alleged in the criminal complaint, she made scores of unauthorized payroll distributions to herself. To justify those unauthorized distributions, Lisa allegedly earlier this year prepared a phony memo dated back to the previous administration of supervisors when they were leaving office in 2013. This memo gave her permission to pay herself for overtime and other expenses, which as a salaried exempt employee, she was not entitled to. She had used this phony memo to justify inflating her salary and other reimbursements by hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Now, this is ex post facto, so you have to understand that she did this after all the money was gone, and here's the memo. None of these additional payments were ever authorized, reported, recorded, or shown in salary or other activity statements. Second, she also allegedly submitted phony bills from legitimate vendors and suppliers for authorization to be paid. After a list of those bills were routinely authorized, she would then go into the computer software, which she alone controlled, and change the payee's name to her name and print out the check, falsifying the records. After the checks were printed, she then took them and then changed the payee's name back in the computer to a seemingly legitimate payee name. There were other variations of this type of fraud as well. Third, she also allegedly made unauthorized distributions for employee benefits, such as paying cash for sick days not taken. She made improper interpretations of the personnel policy to favor herself and others, and also took tax deductions that she was not entitled to. Fourth, she allegedly used township credit cards for personal purchases, such as clothing, beauty treatments, makeup, shoes, jewelry, and other items, theater tickets, and even travel to Europe. All purchases were unauthorized and never reported to the supervisors or anyone else. She ordered that only she was allowed to open up the credit card statements, and similar types of mail. She concealed and withheld other important documents as well. And if you look on page 5 of the other complaint, you can see where she admits to this as well. Over time, she gradually supplied less and less information in her reporting to all of us. Her embezzlement was made possible by several core factors. First, as township manager, she took control of everything. She kept her staff away. They were not allowed to open certain types of mail. They couldn't work on certain systems. And the reasons why, of course, are now obvious, and that has been fixed. Second, Lisa allegedly gave herself unrestricted access to the financial software systems that were in place starting in 2008 and 2009, and allegedly began stealing using those systems. Years later, she did not modernize and safeguard those systems as directed to do so by the supervisors. Why? Because she had the knowledge, skills, and intent to manipulate the existing systems to do what she wanted them to do. Our systems and procedures were adequate for normal municipal bookkeeping in trustworthy hands, but they were not adequate to stop somebody very knowledgeable who had the intent to steal. That is being fixed. Third, there were not enough specific oversight and accountability and not enough separation of responsibilities within the staff. That has been fixed, and this will be addressed a little more later. But last of all, Lisa was also quite skilled at concealing everything that she's doing, and that has been fixed. Again, I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions. Please feel free to ask them during the question and answer period, and I turn it back to you, Scudder.
Thank you, Whitney. When this situation began to unravel, we all had our eyes opened almost every day, and usually not in a good way. We quickly realized that, as the DA and others have now said, Lisa, allegedly, began stealing at least 6.5 years ago and never stopped until we removed her from her job as township manager. She deceived us all, and here's the list again. Supervisors, staff, colleagues, accountants, advisors, auditors, township oversight committees, outside financial advisors and auditors, state auditors, our vendors, and many others. She allegedly took great sums of money from all of us and apparently spent most of it on herself, on things like clothes, beauty treatments, jewelry, makeup, theater tickets, travel, and even charitable contributions for which she personally took the tax deductions, and on and on. Each of us as supervisor is well aware that what Lisa allegedly did was horrible. We know that. Each of us has our own list of things we wish we could go back and do better to prevent this from happening. But hindsight doesn't fix anything. We believe it is our job and our responsibility to fix this terrible mess and to restore trust in the township. And so, from that first day in April, we took full responsibility for everything we can do to get to the bottom of it, to rectify it, and to get the township through it all. So that's a brief look at the first of the two questions in our presentation tonight. What happened? Let's move on to part two. What's being done to fix this terrible mess? Before I begin this section, I'd like to interject an additional thought on this situation. From the day we discovered what had happened and started to get to the bottom of it, we have been asking, as have many of you been asking, who's responsible for all of this? After months of working on this, I realized that there is not just one, but at least two types of responsibility involved here, and they are very different. The first type of responsibility, who's responsible for the crimes that were committed? According to the district attorney and the forensic accountant, Lisa allegedly committed these crimes. The evidence is overwhelming and compelling. She had the power, the knowledge, and the access, and she allegedly used all of that to steal from the township. The facts are very clear. And now I believe it is her responsibility to admit it, to pay back the money, and to face the legal consequences of her actions. The second type of responsibility is who is responsible for cleaning up this mess. The answer is the supervisors of Kennett Township and all the people who provide oversight services as part of our jobs, and that's exactly what we have been doing for the last 8 months. So in this second half of our presentation, I'd like to tell you about what has been done to fix all of this. The story has many parts, some complicated, that we have been waiting a long time to talk about with you. I'm going to try to condense 8 months of long days and the work of many people into just a little time, and let you add that this issue is not yet complete. I'll explain as we go along. I'd like to give you an overview of the principal areas in which we have been working. 1, our first challenge was to keep the township running without interruption in the midst of this crisis and without a manager. We had to make sure that all the normal functions like payroll, operations, paying bills, and the like were done. And it was important to communicate with staff and minimize our disruptions. The news of what Lisa had done was very hard on all of our staff. We kept the township running normally so that residents and businesses would not be disturbed by her dismissal. 2, we had to stop the embezzlement and fraud as quickly and completely as possible. We immediately blocked all the accounts, credit cards, pension funds, and other accounts, and created new access credentials such as passwords. We reversed some unauthorized withdrawals even after we closed off access to all the accounts. 3, we brought in proven, objective, professional investigators and specialists from outside the township. We told them to go back as far as necessary, gather all the facts. This included not only the forensic accountant, who had a major role in supporting the prosecution of any crimes, but also the district attorney's office. We provided the investigators with everything we learned and every lead we developed. 4, we began early on to communicate everything we were able to discuss with residents and the media. We made the investigations the very first item discussed at every supervisors meeting since May. We posted everything possible on the township's website. 5, we fixed everything that was wrong as soon as we found it. Besides the alleged criminal issues in the routine township business, there were errors, omissions, and many items that had been apparently forged or altered, plus mistakes made, papers not filed, bills not paid. We cataloged and fixed each item as they were found. 6, when we hired our new township manager, and recently our new finance director, Amy Heinrich, sitting up here with a computer, we commissioned a licensed private investigator and former criminal detective to complete a thorough background check on each of them. In addition, we have tightened hiring practices and performance standards in general for all employees. 7, we committed ourselves to recover every dollar possible using skilled, experienced, and aggressive means, and pursuing every possible asset. We have an excellent team working on this already, and we will discuss this in more detail shortly. with our recovery expert. 8, we are working to minimize the short and long-term impacts to taxpayers and residents because of the embezzlement by focusing on reducing costs and increasing efficiency in our staffing and improving management and compensation practices to balance out some increased personnel and software costs for greater oversight. 9, we are determined that embezzlement and fraud like this will never happen again in Kennett Township. So that is a brief overview of 9 of the major areas that we have been working on. Now I'd like to talk about some more specific steps and some of the people who have been working on fixing the mess that was created by, as the DA has charged, a more than 6-year pattern of embezzlement and fraud by our forensic township manager, by our former township manager, excuse me. We knew that we would only get one chance to make it right. You have already heard about the many steps that were taken in the first section about what happened. I'd like to tell you now about the thinking behind the actions we took as supervisors during this difficult time. We knew this matter had to be investigated by people from outside Kennett Township, or few people would have confidence in what was found or whatever was done. We wanted to bring resolution to restore trust. Going outside would be the only way that people would trust the findings. And tonight you will meet and hear from a number of those experts firsthand. We recognized that we needed expertise we didn't have. The committee, we committed to hiring the best outside experts we could find to look into every part of our finances and practices and to support, speed up, and supplement the work of the DA's investigation. We also knew we needed to greatly strengthen our professional management of the township operationally as well as financially. We wanted to bring some good out of this terrible situation. We brought in David Wogum of the Maynard Center at Lafayette College, who is an expert in Pennsylvania municipal governance, to advise us on how to keep the township running without a township manager. That led to our hiring Allison Rudolph as interim township manager. She was a municipal manager for 26 years and is an expert in operations, financial management, and many other areas of local government. She helped us in countless ways, and we are deeply, deeply indebted to her. The Maynard Center and Lafayette College also helped us to effectively conduct our search for a new township manager. That resulted in receiving over 30 good applications. We narrowed the field, interviewed many, and chose the candidate we believed to be not only the most qualified, but also the most capable to run the township effectively well into the future. After an extremely thorough background check, we hired Ian Radliff, and he began work as our new township manager on September 23. Many of you already know Eden, and he will be sharing information with us very shortly. Another important commitment we made early on was to be as open as possible, which we knew would be difficult because the district attorney directed us to not to divulge information about the investigation or anything that could hinder a possible later prosecution. That's why we began the investigation reports at every supervisor's meeting. And we wanted to hold this, and why we wanted to hold this public meeting. From the beginning of the DA's investigation, and as the forensic audit began to take shape, we were warned by the DA and our forensic accountants that the eventual total amount of the embezzlement typically averages about 3 times the original estimate. That proved to be the case here. In the early stages, We believed our insurances would cover most of the losses and reported that publicly. As more information came to light, that is clearly no longer the case, and we would need to prepare to recover some of the stolen funds. More on that later. Allison Rudolph began an internal audit of payroll and related practices that showed a number of deficiencies in processes, safeguards, errors, incorrect payments, and underreported and underpaid tax withholdings. She began correcting every problem and restoring confidence in the entire payroll process. Eventually, Allison recommended using an established outside payroll service provider to provide more accuracy and transparency throughout the payroll system. That has now been put into place. When he started working, our new township manager began interviewing all the employees and moved quickly to extend the hours of the township to a full work week from 8:30 to 4:30 every weekday. He also developed a series of corrective measures to align compensation levels, vacation time, and other benefits to conform with general municipal government practices. Eden recently announced the hiring of Amy Henrich, an experienced and highly qualified municipal financial director. He recruited from another township and a resident of Kennett Township, who will manage and report township funds separately from township operations, an important step in safeguarding our finances and providing more accountability. There will be more changes and improvements to the township in the months to come, including upgrades to our accounting software, financial controls, and so on. Eden has also been working with our staff on changes that will make us more efficient and more productive, to better utilize our resources and provide even better services to township residents for their tax dollars. We will continue to communicate these new policies and procedures to you as they occur. Finding experts to help us recover the losses became the next big focus. Our research showed that typically municipalities which suffer major embezzlements recover only a fraction of the total amount stolen. That is unacceptable, and we are committed to recovering as much as possible. To increase our chances of recovering more, we began to search for experts who could aggressively recover much more of the money stolen than we could hope to recover ourselves. After interviewing several firms, we hired Blank Rome LLP, a Philadelphia law firm with a known record for success for difficult recoveries. So one of the questions that many of you have been asking is, what about the money? Can any of it be recovered? How much? Where will it come from? How will it be done? To answer those questions, I'd like to introduce Joseph G. Paluca, Esquire of Blank Rome. I've asked him to tell you about his professional background, his team of recovery specialists, and other information. Joe has agreed to take questions later on during the question and answer period. There you go, Joe.
Thank you, Scudder, and hi, everybody. I'm one of those outsiders that Scudder's talking about. I live in Narberth Borough in Montgomery County. Gone to a couple of council meetings there for various things. I've got to tell you, this is off script. This is an impressive show of community involvement. It's obviously a serious matter, but it really is commendable to see. And the other thing, I'm watching people and I'm starting to listen to the comments. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more later. The bewilderment and the anger, and it's understandable. And I think for everyone in this room, what happened, it's unusual, it's out of the ordinary, it's bad. I think somebody used the word bad. 3 people in this room have probably seen this movie before, many times. Me, Rick Zayas, and Nicole Doniger over there. It happens. It doesn't excuse it. We're going to talk about what we're going to do. Rick's already laid a lot of the groundworks, but it happens. It happens with charities. It happens with public entities.
and it happens with corporations. I had a charity matter, a Bible charity. I'm not going to say the name. It's a woman in payroll. So there'd be ex-employees who left, were terminated, or left from the firm. She was paying herself using those names. A couple $100,000, not as bad as what Lisa Moore is alleged to have done here. But it happens. Another trusted person at a Bible charity. Another example, double the amount of what Lisa is alleged to have taken. Yeah, this was about 6 or 7. A CFO for a CEO in a company downtown Philadelphia, trusted friend, ran the CEO's personal finances, ran all the corporate finances. Totally trusted him, didn't look at anything. 20-year pattern of embezzlement. That person went to jail for 6 to 7 years. By the way, the woman in payroll at the charity went to jail. So it happens. We're going to deal with it. We're going to take every action possible to make sure that we can recover as much money as possible. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I have been practicing law now since about 1984. Real career began in 1990. I was a federal prosecutor in downtown Philadelphia for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Among other people there, I worked with Tom Hogan, your outgoing DA. So I have good relationships in that office. I know Mike Noon, who's also, I think, is not going to be in that office very long. And Rick and I both have good relationships in that office. We went into private practice in 2006, Blank Rome in downtown Philadelphia. What do I do there? So sometimes I have a Lisa Moore. Sometimes I have someone who's been charged with a crime. Sometimes. Try to avoid it. A lot of times I'm dealing with in defense where there's an ongoing investigation and trying to keep someone or something, an organization, from being charged. That's part of what I do. But the other part of what my colleagues and I do are what are called internal investigations, where, again, it could be a public corporation, private, or charity, where the company itself, in this case, a public entity, has been victimized. What happened? What do we do with the wrongdoers? How do we recover the money? The wrongdoing part is almost done. The internal investigation, what that man did over there, Rick Zayas, handed most of it over to the DA's office, and Lisa's now under arrest. There's some loose ends there yet that I want to clean up, but that's part of it. The other part of what we're going to do is try to recover as much of the money that was stolen as possible, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing I want to make clear to people, because I've seen some of the comments on media, Blank Rome's client is Kennett Township. It's you. It's not the supervisors. It's not Eden. It's you. We represent the township. My job is to recover money for the township. The township has to speak through people. Obviously, the township doesn't have a voice, so we will work with the people up here at these tables, but the client legally is the township, and it's the same for Mr. Zayas. Okay, recovery. We're just getting started. Lisa's just been charged, so I'm just going to do high level. We're not going to get into details. We'll see what questions you have later. But let me talk about the criminal case first. Rick and Scudder have talked about that the case has really just begun. Lisa's been arrested. The case can go down 2 different paths, maybe 3. She can plead guilty, just plead guilty, be done with it, be sentenced. Path 1. She could plead guilty and try to cooperate, maybe pay money back to help herself with sentencing. We don't know yet, but there's a 3rd path that may take a long time, and you're going to have to be patient. It's nothing we can control at this table. Rick and I spoke with ADA Noon last Friday. So Moore was arrested last week. If she goes to trial, the case won't be listed, like put on a trial calendar for another 4 to 6 months. So do the math. Okay? Then if it's listed, the trial might not occur for another year. Yeah, that's exactly right. These things take time, and we're going to have to be patient. Hopefully it won't go that long. Hopefully there will be some sort of deal cut with the DA's office, and we'll have a sooner resolution to the criminal case. Just because Lisa Moore is charged criminally doesn't mean we can't do anything against Lisa Moore. So some of the things we'll be looking at, or maybe parallel civil action against Lisa, maybe working with her lawyers, we'll see. It's too early to tell because we don't know where her head is. But there's really two paths of recovery from Lisa herself. I'm sorry? Two paths from Lisa: restitution in the criminal case and civil recovery from the township's lawyers. By the way, that Puerto Rico thing, we had a conversation with the DA. The DA's office really had nothing to do, first of all, the people at this table have nothing to do with whether or not she makes bail, as everybody in this room knows. A bail agent basically makes the call for bail. That's it, with the detective in the room. The DA's office, my understanding, is not appealed. Lisa's passport's been surrendered, and as terrible as it sounds, Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So, okay. Right, exactly right. My only point is we're not in control of that. We're not the prosecutors. We're not that office. That office makes the decisions what to do with Lisa Moore, not Kennett Township, not Kennett Township's lawyers. The second, so there's potential recovery from Lisa, both in the criminal cases, restitution, as well as civil recoveries that we might bring on behalf of the township. Then there's a second bucket after Lisa, and that's insurance. And I know a lot of you have questions. My law firm has specialists. All they do is insurance recovery. Someone's assigned. There are potential insurance coverages. There is a fidelity bond in and of itself that has $1 million coverage on it. We're actively working those matters now. Now that the complaint is filed, we're going to up our efforts. Now that there's an actual criminal case, we can refer to the insurance companies. Stay tuned. So that's the second bucket. So Lisa, bucket 1, insurance, bucket 2. Bucket 3 is any other institution or individual, including those named in the complaint. There may be civil recoveries. And that I'm not going to say anything further about tonight because we're just getting started and we're not going to tip our hand. But that is the third bucket. Institutions that either, you can read the complaint, you can figure out who they are. I'm not going to address it. That's the third bucket. So that's what we're going to do. We'll, through Eden or the supervisors, we'll keep you apprised. But the good news is, and again, Rick and I and Nicole have seen this movie many times. In many of these cases, there's zero recovery. There's pennies on the dollar. And I know, Whitney went through the whole list of shoes and clothing and all that stuff. There are sources of recovery here. We just have to get it. Okay? And we're going to work hard to do it.
Come on back, folks. Come on back. Thank you, Joe. Let's move on to the next section. The financial impacts on the crimes. I've asked Eden, our new township manager, to explain a bit more about the impacts of the crimes and the improvements he is making to our finances and our management. The township is quite serious about taking significant steps to deal with the impacts of the embezzlement and fraud, both financially and in management, as well as to improve and professionalize every part of the way we operate, including building far more security and safeguards into every aspect of what is done. This section is part of what I meant when I said at the beginning that there would be not only some bad news, but there'd be some good news. I think Eden is going to give us some good news here.
Thank you, Scudder, and good evening, everyone. One of the many things that I've appreciated from the community since I started in this role as township manager about 90 days ago is your willingness to allow me to be very direct. And tonight I'd like to continue that with your permission. Despite the thefts and manipulations of finance records, the township is financially solvent. I know that's probably hard to believe, but we're going to get there. The township is not bankrupt. Please take comfort in knowing that our finances are something that we can work with, as evidenced in our previous 7 budget workshops, which many of you were at. One of the challenges we've had is trying to determine what exactly our fund balances should be. What were they before this started? The alleged embezzlement involved a lot of transferring of funds between many different accounts, different funds, and inappropriate allocation of even perfectly legitimate expenses. It's been extremely difficult to sort out, and the process is still underway. Another complicated component of this process is dealing with the previous year budgets, and even the permitted spending. Per the Pennsylvania Second-Class Township Code, which we are governed by, an annual budget is supposed to be an accurate accounting of your expected revenues and your expected expenditures for the following year, of course. The budgets have been inaccurate to the tune of millions of dollars on both the revenue side and the expenditure side. Permitted spending, not the thefts, have exceeded actual revenues and budgeted revenues, because those were different, significantly. As you may have heard me say in previous budget hearings and other township meetings, the township's been deficit spending for years. We have to stop doing that, or we will have additional financial challenges to deal with. For those wondering how this could happen, and there are many answers, some of which you've heard and some of which you're going to continue to hear, one of the ways is that the reports that were provided, that we started going through at some point, they were manipulated as part of the alleged process. So it's difficult to look at a report that's just not accurate as to the facts. So in doing this and trying to figure out exactly what I was going to say tonight, I put together some questions that I thought maybe you would ask or maybe we should ask, and I'm going to try to answer them a little bit off script. And these questions are talking about financial management. I know there's a lot of great questions you're going to ask later tonight, and we look forward to talking about those as well. So one question you might ask is, what exactly is the impact of overspending? What does it mean? Is deficit spending as scary as it sounds? And the answer is it depends, of course, right? So when you deficit spend, it's okay if there's a plan. Do we have a capital plan where we understand our expected expenditures over the next 5 and 10 years and have a revenue plan to support that? If the answer is yes, then deficit spending might be part of the plan. In this situation, we don't have that. Is deficit spending okay if you're going to have major capital expenditures that are part of the process, or maybe it's something unusual like land procurement? Yeah, that's okay, but that's not what we're dealing with here. So we need to get a rein on that. If we don't understand our true expenditures to run the township, which is the core of our general fund, alongside of understanding our capital expenditures over the next 5 and 10 years. I mean, we've replaced trucks, right? We have to manage open space. We have a police department. All these things we need to account for. If we don't have a plan for how to deal with that and a revenue plan to support that, yeah, we're going to have a financial catastrophe. Thankfully, between myself and Amy Heinrich, the finance director, we're not doing that. We are developing those plans. So we're moving in the right direction. Another question you might ask, will that mean that taxes are going up this year? Are they going up next year? I've certainly put the question out there, are taxes going up? You want my opinion? If we don't have to, we should absolutely not raise taxes. Over the course of my career, and Amy's as well, and I'm going to address it, and over Amy's as well, the majority of annual budgets that I've had, that I've advised councils and boards to adopt, have not had a tax increase. When we looked at, and when we started approaching, and it was a very rigorous 60-day process, when we started approaching the 2020 core general fund operating budget to run the township next year, Amy and I said to ourselves and to our budget development team, we said, we need to figure out a way to do this without raising taxes. Now, the elephant in the room is, okay, well, what's going on with this library fund tax, right? This 0.15 mils, why are we doing that? And we're going to talk about that. That's $121,000 that's going to a special revenue fund, which is a library fund, to a non-government organization. It was a philosophical question, and frankly, I said to the board, we don't have a capital plan. We've got a police department that's $1.2 million. We've got fire and EMS expenditures. We're outlaying $1 million in capital expenditures next year, and we're doing that all with revenue that the taxpayers are going to provide us through multiple streams in 2020. So when it came to supporting the library, and the board was of the position that they wanted to, I said, if you're going to do that, you should give it its own special revenue fund. When it came to the general core operating budget, which is the budget that the township manager and the finance director and our team are responsible for going through every expenditure, which we did, when it came to that budget and figuring out what are our expenditures, what can we cut, what can we put off and not do next year. When it came to funding that, we presented a budget with a surplus of $150,000. So we're trending in the right direction. The library tax is a separate conversation, and we can have it. But it was our opinion, and I think that we were successful, that let's not raise taxes to run the township, which we did not do. So I'm happy about that. Another question you might ask, why should you, the taxpayer, have to pay for crimes from poor management of the former manager? My opinion is you shouldn't. I don't want you to. And that was exactly the position I took in July and August when I interviewed for this position with the Board of Supervisors. I said, I don't fully understand, and nor should I, because I was an outsider at that point. The situation that we're in, came to find out there was a lot more information that both the board and I would receive, but I want to work with what we have. Amy, I can speak for her as well. She wants to work with exactly what we have. This is a really great community. There are a lot of really good things happening here. We have good resources. Our EIT is something other townships would die for. We have a lot of great people doing awesome work, and we have good revenue from that, so we can work with that. We need to work with what we have and develop a good path forward, and I think we're well on our way. Another question you might ask, how will this whole situation impact township finances? And frankly, that question should be directed directly to Joe, because a lot of it's going to depend on our recovery efforts, which I am very optimistic for, and hopefully Joe is as well. When we look at the funding that we have, it's reserve funding. So anything that we get from recovery is going to go to the reserves, which will support that capital plan that I told you we're developing. And I hope that you're a part of that process. We'll be developing that plan publicly. So when it comes to impacting township finances, in 2020, the money that is outlaid, the money that is spent, is going to be money that we receive in that year. So the impact at this point is not there. I said to Amy, I said, we're going to be developing this capital plan. There's a lot more information we need. Do you really think we're looking at a tax increase at the end of next year to support this? And we need more information. We'll be public about that. But we're still optimistic at this point. And frankly, if you know me and if we've interacted, I think you would know that I would tell you if I wasn't optimistic. So let's keep talking about it as we move forward. Another question you might ask, are you taking into consideration recovery as you make various financial and budget recommendations to us? How will recovery successful impact future recommendations? The answer to that is yes. I think I just asked that question and answered it. Ultimately, it's going to go into reserves to support that capital funding. Another question that I think that you will ask, what will budget cutbacks mean? Right? So we can't just assume that every expenditure that we have is legitimate. We need to evaluate it. Will those cuts be temporary or permanent, and how will you decide what to cut? We had 7 budget hearings where I asked the public, and Amy and I went through every expenditure that we expect next year, even like the boring ones for office supplies. And we said, what are your priorities? We appreciate, you may not like it, but we appreciate that you pay taxes. We appreciate that you allow us the opportunity to run your government, to spend that. I want to know what your priorities are. Where do you want to see those tax dollars spent? Tell us that. If you can't come to our meetings, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes, they run really late. I get it. Life is busy. Email us, call us, set up a special meeting with us. We'll be happy to meet with you. I want to know exactly what your priorities are, because the municipal operating budget should be a statement of our community priorities, and you are the community. So come tell us. As we figure out those priorities, it'll be much easier to say, okay, well, this thing over here that we're spending money on was not a priority. We didn't hear about it at all, and it's not something we have to do through enabling legislation or something else, so we'll cut it. There should not be surprises in this process, and the way that we develop budgets, both Amy and I, there shouldn't be. So please engage us in that process. Another question that I saw on social media, and I thought, that's a great question, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, was why does a township have a credit card? If it was used in the embezzling process, why have a credit card? Is that usual in townships? I will say in every municipality that I've worked in, we've had a credit card. I asked Amy the same question. She came from another Chester County municipality. They also had a credit card. The credit card is not the problem. It's the controls around the credit card. If the person who has the credit card is spending that money, and I'm going to talk about internal controls in a second, the person who has a credit card should not be the person that's doing the accounting, evaluating the credit card bill, kind of giving oversight. Yeah, so that is in place now. We're there. We are there. That is in place now. Credit cards increase efficiency. There are older days, and I've seen systems and repaired systems in other municipalities where they're still writing handwritten purchase orders for every expenditure. Inefficient. That's not what we're doing here. We need to run this efficiently because that will also save us money. So we're headed in the right direction. So what internal controls and segregation of duties should have been in place and what are in place now? I will tell you that we do have those internal controls now. They're like, with the means that we have now, we need to improve some of that. We're still working with an outside accounting firm that does good work for the township that's helping us in that process. There is good oversight. I could not go to the bank now and withdraw money for the township. I couldn't. I shouldn't. I'm the township manager. That's not my function. It's inappropriate. I have to provide oversight. So we're there. Additionally, I couldn't go into the accounting software and start changing things around. That's inappropriate. I have to provide oversight. And I have to help the board do the same thing. So we're there. We're improving it. And I'm going to talk more about it. I know you have more questions, and I can't wait to answer them later tonight. So, and I'm being serious. I want to answer them. That's what we're here for. So I'd like to keep going, if that's okay. So management areas that are being strengthened, because I've been talking about finances. So some brief overviews of several additional areas in which we are working to strengthen the way Kennett Township works and operates. These are important steps forward for many reasons, including the security of the township finances, integrity of everything the township does, which includes record keeping and reporting, making operations more efficient and more effective, and being better stewards of the tax monies entrusted to the township. So let me give you some examples of where we are. Some 6 areas we've completed or are well underway. The first step has been completed in putting in place internal controls throughout our financial management system. More simply, the person who receives payments to the township should not be the person who reconciles bank accounts. The person who authorizes disbursements should not be the person that is managing and recording the reporting of them. The person who records and reports cannot and will not be the person who manages the township. Financial management cannot be a one-person show because centralized control can lead to a contaminated process. Finally, if something does not look right, then the team in place needs to feel compelled and able to report it. The next step is to increase the sophistication of our annual audit. Most municipalities of our size and some smaller have what is called a full GASB audit performed every year. This is what Amy and I are used to. The worlds that we came from, the previous municipalities we were at, we had full GASB audits and we're moving in that direction. So what is GASB? GASB, G-A-S-B, stands for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And they put forth accounting standards for all local and state governments. Similar to FASB, some of you know the Federal Accounting Standards Board, very similar. GASB recommends a full audit be completed annually. With a full audit is a thorough random sampling to review a large percentage of your annual transactions and reconciling them against what is reported. The GASB process is very thorough and comprehensive. It adds layers of sophistication to the process and the audit. In part, the system is designed to keep honest people honest and identify suspicious transactions. Additionally, we're going to professionalize and expand our finance reporting system to the Board of Supervisors and the public. Some reports are going to be monthly, others will be quarterly. You're going to begin to receive budget to actual reports, cash flow reports, and detailed expenditure reports. And so sometimes when you go to other municipalities, you see those on like a high or mid-level. That's not what we're doing. We're drilling down into the detail. If you want it, we will have it for you, and the board's going to get it as well. So that'll be there. And again, if you don't attend our meetings, they'll be on our website. But we're excited to get there. The strategic combination of these reports will reconcile and allow the board and you, the public, to understand the financial state of the township and see money as it moves throughout our township operations. In addition, beginning this year, the budget development process was public. This is a needed level of transparency to the board and the public, both of whom need to provide intelligent oversight. For those of you who have not attended our budget hearings, there are quite a few for those of you who have attended our budget hearings, and there were quite a few of you, you know what I'm talking about. We went over every expected expenditure for 2020 across every fund. We spent hours and hours going over these transactions and allowed you, the taxpayer, to tell the Board of Supervisors and myself and the rest of the staff where you want your taxpayers spent. While I am manager, every citizen of Kennett Township will have the opportunity to know how the government works and have the access to information you need to be informed and influence the process. Another crucial step is implementing a modernized accounting software. Kennett Township receives and spends millions of dollars a year, and the accounting and reporting of that should be managed by a software that meets the professional demands of that volume and is unlikely to be compromised. We've been test driving software candidates that meet our needs since the beginning of October. Our standards are very high. Tomorrow night, Amy's going to be giving an update to the Board of Supervisors about that process, the test driving and potential candidates for a new and modern and highly sophisticated accounting software program that will host our general ledger. I don't think we're ready for a decision tomorrow night. We're getting there. We have a couple candidates that are very good, but we'll hopefully be taking that action at the beginning of January. So we're getting there. So last and perhaps most important is that professional management and oversight be put into place. Many of the recommendations I outlined have already been put into place in other municipalities at the recommendations of professional managers and professional finance directors. These processes are standard and strong and have the capability to outlive us all. These are not Eden and Amy specific. We're happy to put them in place. We're really thrilled to be here. But someday, inevitably, we're going to leave Kennett Township, and the processes will outlive us. Eliminating the potential for fraud is not an absolute, but preventing it is much more likely with these core practices in place, so long as they are well managed. Scudder said my section of tonight's report would be part of the good news, so let me end on this final note. What happened is heartbreaking, but it's not the end of Kennett Township. There are many amazing things happening in this community, and we have the tools to continue to facilitate positive community outcomes. We now have a team of dedicated and experienced professionals on board to make good things happen, and we are not going to let you down. Thank you.
Thank you, Eden. As I bring this second part of our presentation to a close, I would like to say we understand that everyone is upset about this for many good reasons. Those who knew and liked Lisa, including us, feel betrayed. As residents and taxpayers ourselves, and like you, we feel ripped off. As Lisa's former employers, what we found out has been shocking and saddening. We also understand that looking for someone to blame for all this is understandable. Personally, I believe that Lisa Moore knew exactly what she was doing when she allegedly committed and concealed these crimes over years and years and years. The district attorney and his team agree and said so in their press release, which is posted on the township website. You all have copies, they're in the back. Lisa Moore has now been charged with 115 felony counts, 26 misdemeanor counts. That's why I believe she deserves 100% of the responsibility for her crimes. As the supervisors in place now, this came to light on our watch. We cannot erase more than 6.5 years of criminal wrongdoing. We have taken responsibility to fix it from the first day we discovered it. Having said all that, there is something else that's very important to say. We did not know until recently the total amount of the embezzlement until the forensic audit was completed to the stage reported by the district attorney. We just knew that it was bad, as it seemed to get worse each week. Nor did we know how everyone would react. As bad as this situation became, all of you and all the people of Kennett Township did an absolutely amazing thing. You gave us time to figure out what happened and who was responsible. You gave us time to figure out how to fix it, and you have given us time to straighten it out. So on behalf of the Kennett Township Supervisors and all the staff of Kennett Township and all the team we built to resolve all of this, we want to thank you. To all of you as residents and taxpayers, to all of you who are friends and neighbors, to all of our colleagues in surrounding municipalities who helped us from the very beginning, to all of the skilled and talented people who joined our team to get to the bottom of all this and fix it, and to the media who were incredibly patient with us. We are very grateful to all of you for your patience and the confidence you placed in us. So that is the first two parts of our presentation tonight. What happened and what are we doing to fix it? In a few moments, I'd like to take a short break before we begin the question and answer phase of the evening. We hope you will stay for the question and answer period, but if you need to get going, all of the questions and answers will be videotaped and available on the township's website within a day or so. Before we break, there is a yellow sheet in your handout packet that explains how we will be taking questions, and I will go over all that when we return in about 12 minutes.